Hello, it's Tom from Britcent, and I'm back today with rules on when you should and shouldn't use the glottal T when speaking. It's very important for learners of English to become familiar with the glottal T so that they can incorporate it in their speaking with the true T, helping them to sound more natural. And as many British speakers use the glottal T, it will also help learners with their listening skills for when they meet native speakers. If you missed the first video, where I explain what the glottal T is and why people use it, check it out here. Let's get started. Firstly, let's take a look at when you can use the glottal T in words. In British English, it's very common to use the glottal T when there is a T sound in the middle of a word and it's an unstressed syllable. For example, water with the glottal T becomes water. Get me some water. Starter becomes starter. Let's get a starter. Daughter becomes daughter. Get away from my daughter. Wanted becomes wanted. I wanted to go home. Later becomes later. See you later. So, for words like retain or attempt or retire, we would not use the glottal T sound, as the T sound is at the start of a stressed syllable. Listen to the difference. Later, retain. So, though you might say later, you must never say retain. The glottal T is also used very often with words that end in T. So, for example, that becomes that. That is a lie. Just becomes just. I can't believe you just said that. Can't becomes can't. Oh, I can't stand him. What becomes what? What are you saying though? And caught becomes caught. She caught me cheating. So now we've looked at where we can use the glottal T. But, as always with the English language, there are some exceptions to the rule, where we must use the true T. The first rule is when there is an unvoiced sound before the T. Unvoiced sounds are sounds in which you don't use your voice box. So, for example, the letters S, F, C or K, and X. If you put your fingers here on your throat when you make these sounds, S or F, you won't feel any vibration. These are unvoiced sounds. Therefore, if any of these letters come before a T, we use the true T. So, for example, we would never say res. Instead, we would use the true T and say rest. Have a rest. Or lift. We would say lift. I need a lift. Or actor, we would say actor. I like that actor. Or texted, we would say texted. She hasn't texted me back. And finally, when words begin with a T sound, we always use the true T. Otherwise, it would just sound ridiculous. For example, with the words time, tell, and turn, we would never say I'm, L, or earn, as no one would be able to understand what we were saying. Other than these rules, you can pretty much just pick and choose when to use the glottal T and when to use the true T. If you want to sound like a really natural native British English speaker, the best thing you can do is aim to get a nice balance of both. You can do this by listening to and copying your British friends, and from watching British TV shows and films and listening out for those T sounds. Whatever comes naturally and is easiest for you to say is best. But do remember not to try and force it or overdo it too much with the glottal T, otherwise your accent might start to sound a little strange. Let's look at a few sentences where you might get a mix of the glottal T and the true T. Try to listen out for when I use the glottal T and when I use the true T. Could you get me a bottle of water, please? I need 2 tomatoes and a carrot. I bought a new computer yesterday. She wanted to see you later today. That's all for today. I hope that has helped you understand a little bit more about the glottal T. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.